May God be with you.
And also with
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "If your sister or brother should commit some wrong against you, go and point out the error. But keep it between the two of you. If she or he listens to you, you have won a loved one back. If not, try again. But take one or two others with you, so that every case may stand on the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. And if your sister or brother refuses to listen to them, refer the matter to the church. If she or he ignores even the church, then treat that sister or brother as you would a Gentile. The truth is, whatever you declare bound on earth will be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I tell you, if 2 of you on earth join in agreement to pray for anything whatsoever, it will be granted you by my Abba God in heaven. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there in their midst." The good news of salvation. Good evening, friends. Thank you for your invitation to reflect with you this evening on the readings for this September 10, and share also maybe a few stories of Father Michael Judge, our beloved friend, as we honor this 22nd anniversary of 9/11. The reflection really this evening at its heart is about becoming present to conflict, going to the place of pain in a way, the way of Jesus, the way of Francis, and the way of Michael Judge. Pause with me and take a breath. Holy One, source of life and love, bring us to a place of quiet. Help us to be still as we seek to become present and bearers of hope in the midst of the conflicts in our lives. Open our minds and hearts this evening, that each of us might hear your word to us, calling us once again to life, to liberation, and to love. I don't know if you're like me, but there's times I feel completely overwhelmed by the reality of the world we live in. From morning to night on the iPhone, it's like there's updates constantly on wars from Ukraine, Yemen, Afghanistan, climate change, fires and floods, and so much pain. The plight of migrants and refugees. That was the first thought that came to me as I thought of the gospel today and the message from Jesus: go to the place of pain. And in a conflict, the one that's hurt, the victim, is actually responsible for taking the initiative, for speaking up and calling for a change of heart. I don't know about you, I usually wait for the other to turn around and say, I'm sorry for what I did to you. And yet, actually on the first reading, I was nearly going to call Lewis and say, maybe give me another Sunday with a different gospel. I was sort of having one of those moments of, I would call it a hardening of the heart. It's like, hello, Jesus, are you there? Are you for real? This is fierce, risky stuff, taking on conflict, and especially for us, for those of us who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And then, of course, for a little while, I got lost in the whole exegesis of the scripture text. That didn't last too long. But then I revisited again, and I was thinking of the early community that gave us this gospel, of Matthew, living on their empire conditions, thinking of their Jesus and his way, maybe hanging out in upper rooms, waiting for the courage to possibly risk admitting and acknowledging being followers of the Jesus way. But here in the gospel, there are reassuring words that comfort, as well as that challenge us to take risks, to become visible and speak up. And then, of course, if there's any doubt, it's in Romans where it says, really, in the end, it's all about love. As Christians, gathering each week as we do for Eucharist, our prayer is that we might become the very communion we pray and celebrate. It's about finding a path out of isolation, out of the closets of whatever that is for you. The gospel reminds us that the Christian way is risky and challenging. It's to say yes, enter into radical ways of relating, to see others as brother and sister. It's about entering into relations for communion, for community, for cooperation, not competition. Jesus in this gospel speaks to the reality of human conflict, the fierce burden of the baggage of hurt and injustice and victimhood. Jesus is almost acknowledging is to be human is to hurt. I don't know, we've all done it. I've left my own trail. Jesus, though, here offers wisdom, insight for how do you reconcile? How does one go to a place of righting a relationship gone wrong? Steps to resolving conflict. For the most part, I avoid conflict. Well, you were my height, you might as well, whatever. But anyway, for good reason. As a boy growing up in Ireland, I used to go outside when things got a bit heated in our house. Or even in the local pub, if there was a bit of a row, I'd head out the door. But my attitude shifted with time. Believe it or not, the church is responsible. Because the church I grew up with in Ireland said, it's not enough to pray for peace and justice in the world during Mass on Sunday. Now, this was, I wrote here, this was a fierce change from the pray, pay, and obey way of the childhood years. No. What the message was in my teenage years was, you are responsible for participating and making a difference in the world. And soon I was joining communities in solidarity with the people of El Salvador and in South Africa. I became engaged. Going to Mass resulted in an awakening, a shift in consciousness, a becoming engaged. As I read and thought about the gospel, I was thinking about the victims of sex abuse actually in Ireland and Poland and here, who courageously broke their silence and told their stories and challenged powerful institutions, church institutions around the world, talking about taking a risk to speak. And then, of course, as I read the gospel and prepared, I wondered about the questions that might arise as you hear them, as we hear them, as I hear them. What might the words of Jesus about conflict mean for you and for me? For those of us even just gathered for this Eucharist, as this community of dignity in New York. You know, look, LGBTQ communities are under siege around the world. There is no doubt. There are current waves of injustice, shootings, violence, people sacked from their jobs simply because they seek to live life more openly, more honestly. And then there's the burning of rainbow flags, the removal of books from libraries. Our families, our lives, our loves, questions and debated. It's as if we were born into conflict. I don't know, sometimes I feel like that. Jesus, give me a break, please. I'd like to step off this with our families, with our communities, with our church. It seems to never end. It's risky and tiring. Silence for many is often the way just to survive and get by. But I want to tell you, here's another little point. As I reflected on the gospel, in a very odd way, it awakened in me a sense of gratitude. A sense of gratitude that I am part of this moving movement of LGBT people around the world who are rising up, asking questions from Poland, Ireland, Mexico, Uganda, and this dignity community in its own story. In its prophetic mission, charism, ministry has been about creating in the midst of conflict a space of hospitality, of transformation, of healing, of rest, of change of heart, as well as some of us are out there on the streets working for change in laws. Dignity and the movement of which we're part is about coming out, finding words. In a way, it's a ministry of unbinding, empowering beyond victimhood and silence. I don't know why, for some odd reason, I thought of John McNeil speaking about this message of Jesus, go and speak, you know, restore. I thought of John, his message was like this gospel. Do not be afraid. The Spirit is with you. Become and be your authentic self and build community to bring the message of God's love. You see, for our LGBT community, that also means coming into voice. I call it from silence to speech, personal and collective. And of course, if you've been around dignity, as I have, it wasn't long before we were on the streets together with a banner saying we are Catholic, we are queer, we are gay. That is to engage in a conflict, even some in our own community. It's a very unique and beautiful and profound witness. We witnessed at the cathedral, wrote letters, engaging and addressing hurts and injustices and discrimination from the Vatican to community parades like in Queens. Dignity is a community that has a story and history of speaking up, of a journey collective from silence into speech. We're almost there. As Catholics, you know, in a way, Jesus also has this beautiful message in the gospel about being present. Yeah, I think where that is. But basically, I tell you, if two of you on earth join in agreement to pray for anything whatsoever, it will be granted by my Abba. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there in their midst. I'm going to be honest with you, it was hard for me to get out of my head that I was told Jesus with the bishop, the pope, and this and this. It took a while to shift in consciousness and say God's Spirit is with us and among us. Let us live this gospel. Believe in community. Believe another world is possible. That's really at the heart of this gospel. Jesus saying even here, imagine this, Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Now, I don't know, the Irish world that I grew up in, that basically meant whatever the priest says, you know, or whatever the bishop. But it means in dignity, you and I are called this gospel. Jesus is not speaking and saying to the religious leaders, you know, whatever you declare bound on earth will be bound in heaven. No, Jesus saying to his disciples, that's you and I. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you declare loosed on earth shall be loosed in heaven. I know, maybe I should have stuck to the proper exegesis. Here's where my heart went. I kept thinking of the moments of intervention that I have lived to experience and witness, that brought profound healing, transformation in my own personal life, but in our collective life. I thought of the teenagers way back when I was a religion teacher who got together themselves and wrote a letter in support of their openly gay religion teacher. That's young people getting together and binding, sending a message. It has never left me. It has stayed with me forever. Or I think of the people of Ireland collectively voting on May 22nd, 2015 for marriage equality. That's the people of God rising up, stepping into a conflict and making a statement. I don't know about you, when I was a young fella, this text was all about bishops and popes and whatever. And now I hear this in a very beautiful new way. Jesus saying to us, whatever you bound on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loose in heaven. So in other words, brothers and sisters, in today's gospel, Jesus is speaking to us, to you and to me. You have the power to forgive. You have the power to be a bearer of hope and transformation. You and I have the power to bind and to loose, to bind and unbind. That's fierce. That's empowerment. Like I said, in Ireland, it was always the parish priest and this who ran everything from bingo to football matches and the sermons. But here is the gospel saying you are empowered to heal, to help, to be a bearer of hope, to bind and unbind. I'm going to be honest with you, unbinding for me means, who was it that unbound me from the hold of the deep silence of the closet? Who helped set me free? It wasn't hierarchy. It was the people of God, the witness of people in this community and others. That's why Jesus' word speaks to us. It's a very profound word. We're asked to step into places of conflict, hurt, victimhood, injustice, to help set each other free, and to believe that change is possible. We're called to be transformed into the beloved community. And of course, we're reminded so often in the gospel, we're always a work in progress, aren't we? But how beautiful is that? Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there in their midst, Jesus with us. Michael Judge, on 9/11, on a day of terror and grief and death, which resulted in people going to war in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Here is Michael Judge, the other way, forever remembered as a man of tenderness on the day of terror. You've probably heard me say so often, he had a heart as big as New York. To everyone he met on the streets of New York, the most despised people, the homeless, the drug addicts, whatever, to Michael Judge, it's as if he lived this gospel. Each was a brother or sister, that entering into radical relationship, rethinking and restoring dignity. Or even in the White House, a man of compassion, from Flight 800 to the AIDS crisis, from firefighters recovering severe burns, families in grief at funerals. Michael was a source of hope and healing in the midst of so much personal pain and national tragedy. On this September 10, the night before September 11, he was in the Bronx firehouse and he spoke the words in his final homily. You do what God has called you to do. This is so Michael Judge. You do what God has called you to do. You show up, you put one foot in front of another, you get on the rig, you go out and do the job, which is a mystery and a surprise. You have no idea when you get on that rig, no matter how big, no matter how big the call, no matter how small, you have no idea what God is calling you to. But he needs you, he needs me, he needs all of us. And of course, I often say, while the world really came to know Michael Judge from his death at the World Trade Center, a day of profound darkness. Remember, yesterday and over the coming days, a day of terror, fear, injustice, and death. Yet out of this pit of death, it's as if a light beam in the iconic image of Father Michael Judge being carried by firefighters and rescuers. In our hall in Astoria, Tom actually commissioned from Father Bill McNichols an icon of Michael Judge. And it came a couple of weeks later, and it was an image of Michael Judge hovering over the World Trade Center in flames with St. Francis behind him. And the text in Greek said, Holy Francis, Holy Michael, passion bearers. That's the extraordinary radicalness of this gospel. In the midst of everything, in the midst of war or whatever is happening all around, being a bearer of hope and healing. Have you not experienced that in your own life with someone who stepped in at a moment of hopelessness as a bearer of hope? We do that, don't we, for one another at different crises. And that's what Michael Judge did for so many. Like him and all who gave their lives on that day, we too can choose the path of compassion and tenderness. Michael Judge, in a way, challenges us to shun the path of violence and rage and revenge and woundedness. Trust me, we Irish people, we have a corner of that. Oh God, we nurse hopes. We nurse hurts for ages. I've done it myself. They come out of the blue. But in a way, the gospel is like, let go. Heal what you can. Do the best that you can. Michael Judge challenges us to shun the path of violence and engage in, and I wrote here, the hard work of peacemaking, finding friendship, and new ways to live well our brief lives together. Holy One, thank you for this word, this gospel. Help us to believe the truth that indeed we can help set each other free. A call, a message. May we, in the midst of conflict and pain, have the courage to risk going there, trusting that you empower us to be healers and to bring love and peace. For you are always the God of surprises through the ages and among us as well. We thank you for Michael Judge, who is such a profound and beautiful witness, and all those others who went to the place of profound pain and terror, literally to bring human compassion. And now maybe we could close. I think Tom might have given you a copy of Michael's prayer. Or will. In a way, this is Michael Judge, just to give you one story, in the midst of the AIDS crisis, when I would call him and say, Michael, somebody needs some help. He would say, Brendan, I'll pick you up. And we would get in the car. And he would always say, he just responded and would go and just show up. I often said Michael Judge was more about becoming present. And that's why he began by learning to become present. And that God would do the rest. So join me in Michael's prayer. Lord, Take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say and keep me out of your way. Amen.